So, what happens when a store thinks you're shoplifting and decides to take matters into its own hands? We're about to break down a classic case every law student bumps into: Gortarez versus Smitty's SuperValue. Why this one? Because it gives us the perfect playbook for analyzing the shopkeeper's privilege.
And this is really the whole ballgame, isn't it? This one question is at the very heart of the Gortarez case. You've got a store's right to protect its stuff on one side, and on the other, you've got a person's fundamental right not to be thrown up against a car. That's the conflict we're diving into. All right, we're going to hit this using the FRAC method you already know. We'll go through the facts, pin down the legal issue and rule, walk through the court's analysis, and then land on the holding and the big takeaway you need for your outline. Let's do it.
Okay, first things first, the facts. To really get why the court decided the way it did, you have to know exactly what went down that night at Smitty's. The details are everything here.
I mean, just look at how fast this whole thing went off the rails. It starts with a simple request, something that seems totally innocent, and in a matter of minutes, it explodes into a physical assault in the parking lot. And the wildest part? The security guard, Gibson, he doesn't ask a single question. He just goes straight to physical force based on the clerk's hunch.
And let's not forget what this was all about. This entire chaotic, violent incident, the chase, the chokehold, the eventual lawsuit, it was all over a 59-cent vaporizer. Just let that sink in for a second.
Okay, so we've got the facts down. Now let's pivot to the legal stuff. How did the court take this messy situation and frame it as a clean legal question? And what's the rule they used to figure it out? And there it is. That's the exact issue the court put a frame around. Notice, the question isn't if shoplifting is wrong. Of course it is. The real question is about the boundaries. What are the exact limits of a store's power to act like law enforcement before the actual police show up? So the court goes to the rulebook and it lands right here, the shopkeeper's privilege. This is a statute that basically gives merchants a special, limited power to detain someone. But look at all those conditions. The words you absolutely need to highlight are reasonable cause, reasonable manner, and reasonable time. And this is the part you can't miss. The court makes it crystal clear that this isn't just one vague idea of reasonableness. No, it's a very specific three-part test. A store has to check all three of these boxes to get the protection of the privilege. It's not a buffet. You can't just pick and choose. You need all three. Now for the main event. How did the court take this three-part test and apply it to that chaotic scene in the parking lot? This is where we see the law in action. So let's look at the court's scorecard. First, reasonable cause. Did the store have it? The court says yes. We'll defer to the trial judge on that one. So, check. But that's where the good news for Smitty's ends. Their whole defense just crumbles after that. On proper purpose, the court says, wait a minute, was anyone questioned? Were the police called? Nope. So that's a question for the jury. And then, the big one, reasonable manner. Using a chokehold? Yeah, that's definitely a question for the jury. And just to really hammer the point home on reasonable manner, the court pulls in this killer quote from the Restatement of Torts. It draws a super bright line in the sand. You cannot use force that could cause serious injury just to ask a few questions. A chokehold for a 59-cent item is so far over that line, it's not even funny. So, after all that analysis, what was the final call? Let's wrap this up with the court's official holding and the one big lesson you need to take away from this entire case. The Arizona Supreme Court hit the brakes and reversed the lower court. They said the trial judge got it wrong by deciding the purpose and manner were reasonable all by himself. The Supreme Court made it clear those are questions of fact, and in a case like this, that's a job for the jury. So what's the bottom line here? Here's what you need to remember. The shopkeeper's privilege is a shield for the store, but it's not a sword to attack customers with. Having reasonable cause is just the ticket to get in the door. It's not a free pass. You have to go on and analyze the purpose and the manner separately. If a store fails on any single part of this three-part test, poof, the privilege vanishes. Gortarez makes it super clear that reasonableness often comes down to what a jury thinks. So as you read the next case, keep this question simmering. How do all these little facts, the value of the item, how sure the employee was, the level of force they used, how do they all get weighed on the scales of justice? This case was never really just about a 59-cent air freshener. It's about finding that delicate balance between property and liberty. Where do you think that line should be drawn?